When did you realize your parents would never accept you? When I was 5, she sat me down and explained that women have two faces. The face they're born with, which is shameful and needs to be hidden, and the face they create, which is how they survive in the world. She said I was lucky because she was going to teach me early so I'd never have to suffer like she did. That day she did my makeup for the first time. I looked like a little doll and felt so grown up. She took a million pictures and posted them everywhere, and everyone's comments about how cute I was encouraged her. The next morning she woke me up an hour early for school and sat me at her vanity. She did my full face again and explained that this was going to be our routine from now on. Every day before school I had to wear makeup. The world is cruel to ugly girls and I love you too much to let you be ugly, she'd say. I was 5 and I didn't even know what that meant, but she made it very clear that leaving the house without makeup was not an option. At first it felt kind of special. I was the only girl in kindergarten wearing makeup and I got a lot of attention. But it took so long every morning and I hated sitting still. Mom would get frustrated when I fidgeted and she'd grip my chin really hard to hold me still. By first grade, she started teaching me to do it myself, because she said she wouldn't always be there to do it for me. I had to practice for hours getting the eyeliner straight and blending the eyeshadow. If I did it wrong, she'd make me wash it all off and start over even if it made me late for school. The rules were intense. I had to wear makeup at all times when anyone could see me. School, errands, family dinners, everywhere. If I was home alone, I could take it off, but the second someone came home, I had to put it back on immediately. Mom would surprise me sometimes by coming home early to make sure I wasn't walking around barefaced. I couldn't go swimming because chlorine ruins makeup and she refused to buy waterproof products for a kid, saying they were bad for my skin. I couldn't play sports because sweating makes you look melted. I couldn't have sleepovers because I'd have to wake up before my friends to put on makeup, and Mom said that would raise questions. When I was sick, it was even worse. Mom said being sick makes you look even uglier, so you need makeup more than ever. I'd be running a fever and she'd still make me sit up and let her do my face before she'd bring me soup. The time I had the flu and couldn't stop throwing up, she'd wait outside the bathroom with her makeup bag and redo my face after every time I threw up because I'd sweated it off. She said, "You think your father wants to see you looking like a corpse?" School pictures were a nightmare. Mom would do my makeup extra heavy for picture day, and I'd show up looking like a different person. Teachers started asking if everything was okay at home. Other moms would give my mom these looks at pickup. But Mom just said they were jealous that I was prettier than their daughters. By 4th grade, the other girls started making fun of me. They called me fake and said I looked like a clown. I came home crying and told Mom I wanted to stop wearing makeup and she slapped me. She said, "Don't you ever say that again. Do you want to end up alone and miserable like I would have been?" I told her she wasn't alone, she had Dad and me. She said, "Only because I'm smart enough to hide what I really look like." I became terrified of my own face. I started avoiding mirrors unless I had makeup on. I didn't even know what I really looked like anymore. Was I ugly like Mom said? Would people really be disgusted by me without makeup? I felt like I was wearing a mask every single day, and I couldn't remember what was underneath it. When I was 12, I tried to go one day without makeup. Just one day to see what would happen. I woke up early and got dressed and went downstairs for breakfast with my bare face. Mom took one look at me and said, "Go upstairs right now and fix yourself or I'm calling the school and telling them you're too sick to come in." I said I just wanted one day to feel normal. She said, "This is normal. Your face without makeup is not normal. It's unacceptable." She followed me upstairs and stood over me while I did my makeup crying the whole time. She said, "I'm doing this because I love you. One day you'll understand." But neither of us had any idea how things were going to spiral from there. The next morning I woke up and my face felt wrong. The skin around my eyes was tight and sore, like it had been stretched too thin. I touched the area gently and felt small bumps under my fingers, rough and raised. When I looked in the mirror, I could see them clearly. Little red dots clustered where my eye makeup always sat the thickest. My stomach dropped because I knew exactly what Mom would say when she saw them. She'd say I needed more coverage, heavier products, better application. The thought made me want to crawl back into bed and hide under the blankets. But I heard her footsteps in the hallway, and knew I had about 30 seconds before she came in to wake me up for our morning routine. I sat down at my vanity and stared at my reflection, at the bumps and the redness and the way my skin looked angry and raw. The makeup hadn't protected me like Mom always said it would. It was hurting me instead. Mom opened my door without knocking and took one look at my face. She crossed the room in 3 steps and grabbed my chin, turning my head toward the window light. Her fingers pressed into my jaw while she examined the bumps around my eyes. She made a clicking sound with her tongue and let go of my face. She left the room and came back a minute later carrying her makeup bag and a tube of concealer I'd never seen before. The tube was thick and professional looking, the kind that came from a special store instead of the drugstore. She unscrewed the cap and squeezed some onto her finger. It came out like paste, heavy and dense, the color a shade too light for my skin. I opened my mouth to say something, but she was already applying it, dabbing it over the bumps with rough motions that made me wince. The concealer felt like clay drying on my face. She worked quickly and didn't talk, just kept layering the product over my irritated skin. I sat frozen at the kitchen table where she'd moved me, my hands clenched in my lap. Dad was at the table too, his newspaper spread out in front of him and his coffee steaming in its mug. He didn't look up from the sports section even when Mom's fingers pressed too hard, and I made a small noise of pain. When Mom finally finished and stepped back to look at her work, Dad glanced at my face. Just once, Quick, and then away. His eyes had something in them that might have been worry, or maybe just discomfort. But then he picked up his coffee and took a long sip, his gaze dropping back to the newspaper. He turned the page with a crisp snap. The sound seemed loud in the quiet kitchen. I realized in that moment that this was what he always did. He was there in the room, physically present, eating his breakfast and reading his news. But he wasn't really there at all. He'd learned how to exist in the same space as Mom's rules without actually seeing them or stopping them. He'd perfected the art of looking away at exactly the right moment. I'd never felt more alone than I did sitting at that table with both my parents. Mom was treating my face like a problem to be fixed with more makeup. Dad was pretending nothing was happening at all. And I was stuck between them with paste drying on my burning skin. Something shifted inside me right then. I made a decision sitting at that kitchen table with my face feeling like it was on fire under all that concealer. I needed to try going one full day without any makeup on. Just one day to prove to myself that the world wouldn't actually end if people saw my real face. The thought scared me. So much I felt sick. My hands started shaking and I had to grip the edge of the table to steady them. But the bumps on my face were getting worse, not better, and I couldn't keep living like this forever. I couldn't keep letting Mom pile more and more product onto my skin when it was clearly making things worse. I didn't know how I was going to do it or when I'd find the courage. But the decision was made. I was going to try. At the school, I made it through first and second period okay. But by the time third period ended, I could feel my makeup sliding off. The concealer Mom had caked on that morning wasn't staying put on my irritated skin. I could feel it shifting and separating, probably making the bumps look even worse. During passing period, I ducked into the bathroom and locked myself in a stall. I pulled out the compact Mom made me carry and looked at my reflection in the tiny mirror. The makeup was definitely sliding, leaving patches of red bumpy skin visible around my eyes. I dabbed at it with powder and tried to blend the edges, but my skin was too sore to press hard. Through the stall door, I could hear other girls coming in and out of the bathroom. They were laughing and talking, their voices light and easy. I peeked through the crack in the stall door and watched them. 2 girls were washing their hands at the sink, their faces completely bare except for maybe some lip gloss. Another girl was checking her teeth in the mirror, no makeup at all, just her regular face. They looked comfortable and normal and happy. The gap between their reality and mine felt like a canyon I could never cross. They didn't know what it was like to be terrified of their own reflection. They didn't understand that some of us couldn't just walk around with bare faces like it was no big deal. After class, Miss Lancaster asked me to stay back for a minute. My heart started pounding because teachers asking you to stay after class was never good. The other students filed out, and then it was just me and her in the empty classroom. She sat on the edge of her desk and looked at me with a gentle expression. She said she wanted to check if everything was okay at home. She mentioned that she'd noticed I always wore really heavy makeup, and sometimes that worried her when she saw it on teenagers. Her voice was soft and careful, like she was trying not to scare me. I froze up completely. My mind went blank and I couldn't think of what to say. I mumbled something about just really liking makeup, that it was my choice and my style. The words sounded fake even to me. Then I grabbed my backpack and rushed out of the classroom before she could ask anything else. I could feel her watching me leave, but I didn't turn around. After school, I was walking past the main bulletin board when a bright yellow flyer caught my eye. Spring play auditions, it said in big letters. They were doing a comedy this year and auditions were open to everyone. My heart jumped in my chest because I'd always wanted to be in a play. I loved acting and performing, but Mom had never let me try out before because of rehearsal schedules and time commitments. I stopped and read the whole flyer carefully. Then I saw the line at the bottom in smaller print. It said something about maintaining a neutral appearance for blocking rehearsals, so the costume and stage makeup departments could work properly. Neutral appearance? That meant no makeup. My excitement crashed into panic so fast it made me dizzy. I wanted to audition so badly I could taste it, but there was no way Mom would ever let me do rehearsals without makeup. No way at all. I was still standing there staring at the flyer when Rowan came up beside me. She saw what I was looking at and immediately started talking about how perfect I'd be for the lead role. She grabbed my arm and shook it, saying I had to audition, that I'd be amazing. I tried to explain about the neutral appearance thing, but she waved it off. She said we could figure it out together. She promised to help me with makeup wipes backstage and said we'd make it work somehow. Her confidence was infectious. She made it sound so simple and possible. Standing there with her hand on my arm and her face all lit up with excitement, I started to think maybe I actually could try. Maybe with her help I could find a way to make this work. I showed up to auditions 3 days later wearing the lightest makeup I'd ever done in public. Just mascara on my lashes and some lip gloss. That was it. No foundation, no concealer, no eyeshadow, no eyeliner. My hands shook while I got ready that morning and I almost chickened out a dozen times. But I kept thinking about Rowan's confidence and the promise I'd made to myself at the kitchen table. I walked into the auditorium with my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. My face felt naked and exposed under the stage lights. But when I started reading the lines, something weird happened. I felt present in my own skin for the first time in forever. I wasn't hiding behind layers of product. I was just me, saying words and feeling emotions and being a character. The director smiled and nodded while I read. When I finished, she thanked me and said that was exactly what she was looking for. I'd nailed it. I actually nailed the audition. That night, I came home floating on air from the audition high. I dumped my backpack on my bed and went to brush my teeth. When I came back to my room, Mom was standing in my doorway. She was holding a piece of paper in her hand, the rehearsal schedule that had been in my backpack. Her face was completely white, drained of all color. Then red started creeping up her neck and into her cheeks. She held up the paper and I could see the note scribbled at the bottom about the bare face requirement for blocking rehearsals. Her hand was shaking. I knew right then that I was in serious trouble. Dinner that night felt like sitting in a courtroom waiting for my sentence. Mom made my favorite pasta, but I could barely taste it. She kept looking at me across the table with this tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dad focused on his plate like it was the most interesting thing in the world. Nobody spoke for the first 10 minutes except for the scraping of forks against plates. Then Mom set down her fork and folded her hands. She started talking in this calm, measured voice that was somehow worse than yelling. She said makeup wasn't just about looking pretty. It was about survival in a world that judged women harshly for every imperfection. She said she knew I didn't understand yet because I was young and naive, but ugly girls got passed over for jobs, relationships, opportunities. She said she loved me too much to let me be one of those girls who learned that lesson the hard way. Dad cut his chicken into smaller and smaller pieces, nodding occasionally but never looking up. He didn't defend me or challenge anything she said. He just kept cutting and nodding like a robot. That's when it hit me that he was never going to protect me from this. He was going to sit there forever cutting his food and pretending everything was normal while Mom controlled every aspect of my appearance. The realization felt heavy in my chest. Mom's voice got sharper as she moved from her general speech to the specific problem of the play rehearsals. She said if I showed up to even one rehearsal without my full face done properly, she'd pull me from the play entirely. She'd call the school and complain about inappropriate requirements that put students at risk. She'd make sure the drama teacher knew exactly whose fault it was that I had to quit. The threat hung there between us, and I watched my brief moment of freedom slip away like water through my fingers. I wanted to argue, but the words stuck in my throat. What could I even say that wouldn't make things worse? The next morning, I went to the school with my makeup done even heavier than usual because Mom wanted to make a point. My foundation felt thick and suffocating. Between third and fourth period, I was walking to my locker when the tears just started coming. I couldn't stop them. I pressed my back against the wall in the hallway and tried to wipe my eyes without smudging my eyeliner, but it was already too late. Black streaks ran down my cheeks. That's when Whitney appeared next to me. She was the school counselor, and I'd seen her around but never talked to her. She touched my shoulder gently and asked if I wanted to come to her office. I was guarded at first because what if she called my parents or made everything worse? But something about the way she waited patiently without pushing made me think maybe I could trust her. We walked to her office in silence, and she closed the door softly behind us. She handed me tissues and didn't ask any questions right away, just let me cry until I was ready to talk. That night after dinner, I waited until I heard Mom and Dad's bedroom door close. I counted to 100 in my head to make sure they were settled. Then I crept downstairs in my pajamas and slipped out onto the back porch. The night air hit my bare face and I almost gasped at how good it felt. I'd washed off my makeup as soon as I got home from the school like always, but being outside without it felt completely different from being alone in my room. The stars were bright and I could feel the breeze on my actual skin instead of through layers of product. For 5 whole minutes, I sat there on the porch steps and felt like a real person. Then I heard footsteps inside the house and panic shot through me. I grabbed the sleeve of my hoodie and scrubbed it across my face even though there was no makeup to wipe off anymore. I rushed inside and headed straight for the stairs. Mom was in the kitchen getting water and she glanced at me but didn't say anything. My heart was pounding like I'd done something terrible. The next day, Mom posted a bunch of throwback photos on her social media. Pictures of me at 6 years old in full makeup, looking like a tiny adult. The comments started rolling in immediately. Some people wrote things like so cute and gorgeous little girl with heart emojis. But other comments said, isn't she a bit young for all that? And why does a child need makeup? Mom showed me her phone at breakfast, scrolling through and reading the positive comments out loud like they were proof she was right about everything. I noticed her thumb moving quickly past certain comments, and later when I checked from my own account, I realized she'd deleted all the concerned ones. She was curating reality to match her beliefs. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling and made a decision. I needed to get help from the school, even though asking for help felt like betraying my family. But my face was breaking out worse every day from the constant makeup. The red bumps had spread from around my eyes to my cheeks and forehead. I was starting to have panic attacks when I looked in mirrors, my chest getting tight and my breathing going shallow. Something had to change or I was going to fall apart completely. The next week, Whitney called me down to her office officially. She had a notepad ready, and she asked me to explain everything from the beginning. I told her about the daily makeup requirement that started when I was 5. I explained the rules about never being seen barefaced by anyone. I described how Mom would surprise me by coming home early to check on me. Whitney stayed calm and professional the whole time, writing notes in neat handwriting. But I could see shock in her eyes when I got to the part about being sick with the flu. When I described Mom waiting outside the bathroom with her makeup bag to redo my face after every time I threw up, Whitney's pen stopped moving for a second. She took a breath and kept writing. After our meeting, Whitney walked me down to the nurse's office. Maddie was the school nurse, and she'd always been nice to me when I came in for headaches or stomach aches. Whitney explained that she wanted Maddie to look at my skin. Maddie had me sit under the bright light, and she examined my face carefully, asking questions about my skincare routine and what products I used. She identified it immediately as contact dermatitis from prolonged cosmetic use. She said my skin was reacting to being covered constantly without enough time to breathe. She wrote a formal note on the school letterhead recommending reduced makeup application and a dermatology referral. When she handed it to me, the paper felt important in my hands, like a weapon I could actually use. That weekend, I was organizing my closet because Mom had asked me to donate old clothes. I pulled down a box from the top shelf and found an old photo album I'd never seen before. It was filled with pictures of Mom as a kid. I flipped through pages of her at different ages, and then I found one that made me stop breathing. Mom at 12 years old with a completely bare face, no makeup at all. She was smiling at the camera, looking happy and normal and young. The image didn't match anything she'd ever told me about always needing makeup to be acceptable. She looked pretty without any products on her face. She looked like a regular kid. I was still staring at the photo when I heard footsteps in the hallway. Dad appeared in my doorway and saw what I was holding. He looked at the photo for a long moment and then sat down heavily on my bed. The mattress sagged under his weight. He was quiet for so long I thought maybe he wasn't going to say anything. Then he started talking in this low voice I'd never heard him use before. He told me that Mom's own mother had told her she was ugly every single day of her childhood. Every morning her mother would criticize her face and tell her no man would ever want her looking like that. He said Mom was trying to spare me that pain by teaching me early how to hide my flaws. But then he said something that made my whole body go still. He said he knew what she was doing wasn't normal. It was the first time Dad had ever admitted out loud that Mom's behavior was wrong. The first time he'd acknowledged that this wasn't just strict parenting or high standards. It was something else entirely. Something that was hurting me. I looked at him sitting there on my bed with his shoulders slumped, and I wanted him to do something about it. But he just sat there looking tired and sad. Like knowing it was wrong was enough. Like saying it out loud was the same as actually protecting me. The next morning, Whitney called me down to her office during second period. She had a blue hall pass ready, and she explained that she'd worked something out with the administration. There was a small study room on the third floor that nobody used during the transition between third and fourth period. She'd gotten permission for me to spend 5 minutes there with the door closed and no makeup on, just to practice being seen by myself. The pass would let me leave class early and get there before anyone else was in the hallway. My hands shook when she handed me the laminated pass with my name on it. She said I didn't have to use it if I wasn't ready, but it would be there whenever I wanted to try. That afternoon, I stood outside the study room for 3 full minutes before I could make myself go inside. The room was tiny with one desk and a small window in the door. I locked myself in and sat down at the desk. My heart was pounding, so hard I could hear it in my ears. I pulled out the makeup wipes I'd hidden in my backpack and started removing everything. Foundation first, then eyeshadow, then mascara. The wipes came away covered in beige and black, and I felt like I was erasing myself. When my face was completely bare, I made myself look in the black screen of my phone. I looked pale and young and scared. Not ugly like Mom always said, just normal. Just like a regular teenage girl. Nothing bad happened. The ceiling didn't fall in. Nobody burst through the door screaming. I sat there for the full 5 minutes with my bare face and nothing terrible occurred. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway and panic shot through me. I grabbed my makeup bag and started reapplying everything as fast as I could. My hands were shaking so bad the eyeliner went on crooked, but I didn't have time to fix it. I shoved everything back in my bag and unlocked the door. But when I stepped into the hallway, Mom was standing there. She was just standing in the middle of the third floor hallway in her work clothes, staring at me through the study room window. Her face was white and her mouth was pressed into a thin line. I froze completely. She'd seen me. She'd seen my bare face through the window before I'd gotten my makeup back on. She walked toward me fast and I backed up against the lockers. She grabbed my arm hard enough to leave marks and started pulling me toward the stairs. Other students were starting to come out of classrooms for the period change and they were all staring at us. Mom dragged me down 2 flights of stairs and out to the parking lot. She didn't say anything until we got to her car. Then she spun me around to face her and her voice was shaking. She asked me what I thought I was doing. She asked if I was trying to humiliate her. She said the school had called her as a courtesy to let her know about the study room arrangement, and she'd come immediately to see what was happening. She called me ungrateful. She said after everything she'd done to protect me, after all the time she'd spent teaching me how to survive, I was throwing it back in her face. She said I was going to end up alone and ugly and nobody would want me. Students were walking past us to get to their cars and I could feel them watching. Some of them had their phones out. Mom didn't seem to care. She kept yelling about respect and protection and love. Finally, she told me to get in the car. We drove home in complete silence. That night after dinner, Mom came into my room without knocking. She held out her hand and told me to give her my phone. I asked why, and she said she needed to check something. When I handed it over, she sat down on my bed and started going through everything. She opened my messages with Whitney. She read every single text. She went through my photos looking for pictures of myself without makeup. She checked my search history for terms like face fear and controlling parents. She found my conversation with Rowan about the study room and read it out loud in this mocking voice. Then she opened my bathroom drawer and took out all my makeup wipes. Every single package. She said I clearly couldn't be trusted with them anymore. She took my phone with her when she left and I heard her setting her alarm in her bedroom. She set it for 4:30 in the morning instead of 5:30. An extra hour for makeup sessions. I lay in my bed feeling like the walls were closing in. The house was completely quiet, but I couldn't sleep. I felt like a prisoner. Like I was watched every second, even when I was alone. Around midnight, I got up and pulled an old notebook out of my desk drawer. I'd gotten it as a free promotional thing from some company and never used it. I opened it to the first page and started writing. I wrote down what had happened today. The study room, mom showing up, the parking lot scene, the phone search. I wrote down how it made me feel. Trapped, scared, angry. I wrote that this wasn't normal love. Normal mothers don't control their daughters like this. Normal mothers don't make their kids afraid of their own faces. I wrote the word control over and over. Writing it down helped somehow. Like I was taking the thoughts out of my head and putting them somewhere safe where mom couldn't get to them. When I was done, I slid the notebook between my mattress and box spring where she'd never think to look. The next day, Whitney called me to her office again. She said she'd heard about what happened with mom and she was sorry. She said she had someone she wanted me to talk to. A therapist named Dean who worked with teenagers dealing with family stuff. She'd already called him and explained the situation, and he had an opening next week. She wrote down his address and phone number on a sticky note and handed it to me. I stared at the yellow paper with his information on it. The idea of talking to a stranger about mom made my stomach hurt. But I was also desperate. I needed someone to tell me I wasn't crazy, that this wasn't normal, that I wasn't wrong for wanting to see my own face. I folded the sticky note and put it in my pocket. Whitney said Dean was really good at helping people understand complicated family relationships. She said he'd worked with lots of kids whose parents loved them but hurt them at the same time. The way she said it made something click in my head. Mom did love me. I knew that. But she was also hurting me. Both things were true at the same time. A week later, Dad drove me to Dean's office for my intake appointment. The office was in a regular house that had been converted into a therapy space. Dean met me in the waiting room. He was younger than I expected with glasses and a calm way of talking. He brought me back to his office, which had comfortable chairs and soft lighting. He asked me to tell him why I was there. I started talking, and once I started, I couldn't stop. I told him everything. The daily makeup since I was 5. The rules. The fear. The study room incident. Mom showing up. The phone search. He listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a minute. Then he started explaining things to me using words I'd never heard before. He said what I was describing sounded like conditional love. Love that only exists when you meet certain requirements. He said it also sounded like enmeshment, where a parent doesn't see their child as a separate person with their own needs. He explained that my fear of my own face was a trauma response, that I'd been taught to associate my bare face with danger and rejection. He said it wasn't a character flaw or weakness. It was a normal reaction to years of being told my natural face was unacceptable. Hearing him say that made something break open inside me. I started crying and couldn't stop. He handed me a box of tissues and waited. When I could talk again, I told him I thought there was something wrong with me, that I was weak for being so scared. He said no. He said what happened to me wasn't normal, and my reactions made perfect sense. He said we could work together to help me separate mom's fears from reality, to help me see my own face without panic. I left that session feeling lighter than I had in months, like someone had finally given me permission to feel what I was feeling. The next morning, I decided to try something. I did my makeup routine, but I made it lighter. Just foundation and mascara. No eyeshadow or lipstick or heavy contouring. I thought maybe mom wouldn't notice if the change was small. I went downstairs for breakfast and she looked up from her coffee. She stared at my face for 3 seconds. Then she stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. She asked what I thought I was doing. I said I was trying a more natural look. She said it looked lazy. She said I looked half finished. She grabbed my arm and pulled me back upstairs to the bathroom. She made me sit on the closed toilet while she got out her makeup remover. She removed everything I'd done roughly, not caring when the remover got in my eyes and stung. Then she redid my entire face herself. She gripped my chin so hard while she worked that I knew it would leave marks. She did the full routine: heavy foundation, contoured cheekbones, dark eyeshadow, winged eyeliner, bright lipstick. When she was done, I looked like I was going to a party, not to the school. She said this was how I was supposed to look. This was acceptable. Anything less was disrespectful to her and to myself. That afternoon, my phone rang during lunch. It was the theater director. She said she wanted to offer me the lead role in the spring play. My heart jumped. She explained that rehearsals would be Tuesday and Thursday afternoons plus Saturday mornings. She said blocking rehearsals would be bare face only so they could see natural expressions and plan stage makeup properly. I told her I needed to talk to my mom first. That night at dinner, I told mom about the callback. I explained about the rehearsal schedule. When I got to the part about bare face blocking, she put down her fork. She said no. Just flat out no. I tried to explain that it was the lead role, that I'd worked really hard at the audition, that this was important to me. She said if the role required me to show my face without makeup, then it wasn't a role worth having. She said she'd email the director tonight to withdraw me from consideration. I begged her to reconsider. She said the discussion was over. After dinner, I heard her in her office typing. She was actually emailing the director. I'd lost the role. The next day, Rowan found me at my locker between classes. She said her mom was out of town this weekend and she wanted to have a low-key hangout. Just the two of us. Face masks and skincare and maybe painting our nails. The kind of normal teenage girl stuff I'd seen in movies but never experienced. She said we could just relax and be comfortable. No pressure. I wanted to say yes so badly. I wanted one normal teenage experience. But the thought of taking off my makeup in front of someone made my chest tight. Even Rowan, who I trusted. I told her I couldn't. She asked why, and I couldn't think of a good excuse. So I just told her the truth. I said I was afraid of my own face. I said my mom's reaction scared me. I said I didn't know how to be a normal person who just existed without makeup. Rowan was quiet for a second. Then she said, okay. She said whenever I was ready, the invitation stood. She didn't push or ask more questions. She just accepted it. The next morning, I came downstairs early for my makeup session. But Dad wasn't at the table. His coffee cup was in the sink already washed. I looked out the window and saw his car was gone. He'd left for work an hour earlier than usual. He did the same thing the next day. And the day after that. I realized he was avoiding the morning makeup sessions. He didn't want to watch Mom grip my chin and paint my face while I sat there frozen. He was choosing not to see it. Choosing his own comfort over protecting me. That hurt worse than anything Mom did. Because Mom believed she was helping me even if she was wrong. But Dad knew it was wrong and he was just walking away. He was abandoning me to deal with this alone. I wrote it all down in my secret journal that night. I wrote that Dad's absence felt like betrayal. That I'd thought he might eventually stand up for me. But now I knew he never would. That I was truly on my own in this house. The only people who seemed to care were Whitney and Dean and Rowan. People outside my family. My own father couldn't even stay in the room while it happened. The next week, Whitney pulled me aside after my session and asked if I wanted to join a small group swim she was organizing at the school pool on Saturday morning. She said it would just be a few students from her support group, and the pool would be closed to everyone else. I felt my chest get tight at the thought of swimming without makeup, but I forced myself to say yes, because I couldn't keep living like this. Saturday morning, I woke up early and did my full makeup routine like always, then packed a bag and told Mom I was going to the library to study. The lie made my stomach hurt, but I knew she'd never let me go if she knew the truth. I met Whitney and 3 other girls at the side entrance of the school, and we walked to the pool together. The other girls were chatting and laughing, but I was so nervous I thought I might throw up. In the locker room, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time with makeup wipes in my hand. One of the girls named Sarah noticed me frozen there and said it was okay to take my time. I wiped off my foundation first, then my eyeshadow, then my mascara and lipstick. My bare face stared back at me in the mirror and I looked like a stranger. We walked out to the pool and I kept my head down, scared someone would see me even though Whitney promised the building was locked. The water was cold when I jumped in and it felt shocking and clean on my skin. We swam laps and played around and splashed each other, and for 1 hour I was just a normal teenager having fun with friends. The water on my bare face felt like freedom and terror mixed together. I kept touching my face underwater, feeling how smooth and clean it was without all the layers of makeup. When we got out, Sarah said I looked pretty without makeup, and I almost started crying because nobody had ever said that before. I dried off and put my makeup back on in the locker room before leaving, my hands shaking the whole time. The drive home felt too short, and I wished I could stay in that moment at the pool forever. When I walked through the front door, Mom was standing in the hallway waiting for me. She walked right up to me and sniffed my hair, then stepped back with her eyes narrow. She asked where I'd really been, and I said the library like I told her. She said I smelled like chlorine and pulled out her phone to check my location history. I watched her face turn red as she saw I'd been at the school, and she demanded to know what I was doing there on a Saturday. I admitted I went swimming with some friends, and she exploded. She started yelling about how I went swimming without makeup, how anyone could have seen me, how I was trying to humiliate her on purpose. She said if I couldn't be trusted to follow the rules, then she'd have to start checking on me every hour. She grabbed my phone right out of my hand and said she was taking it away until I could prove I deserved it back. She also said she was going to install tracking apps and make me check in constantly, so she always knew where I was. I tried to explain that the pool was closed and nobody saw me, but she wouldn't listen. She just kept saying I'd betrayed her trust and broken the most important rule. Dad came downstairs during the yelling, but he just stood there watching, not saying anything to defend me or calm Mom down. I went up to my room and cried into my pillow, feeling like the walls were closing in. The next few days were worse than ever. Mom kept my phone and started monitoring all my social media from her own device. She'd comment on my posts pretending to be me and message my friends back using my accounts. I'd see notifications on her phone when I walked past and realized she was controlling every conversation I had online. She changed all my passwords so I couldn't log in from the school computers. Rowan asked me in person why I was being weird over text, and I had to explain that my mom had taken my phone. The isolation felt like it was choking me. I couldn't talk to anyone without Mom watching and controlling what I said. I felt like I was disappearing into the person she wanted me to be instead of who I actually was. Every time I tried to have my own thoughts or feelings or friendships, she found a way to take control of them. I started having trouble sleeping because I'd lie awake thinking about how trapped I was. At the school, I felt like I was walking around in a fog, barely paying attention in class because all I could think about was how to get my life back. My next appointment with Dean was on Thursday after school, and Mom had to drive me there since I didn't have my phone to call for a ride. She dropped me off and said she'd be back in exactly 1 hour. Dean could tell something was wrong as soon as I sat down and I told him everything about the swim and the phone and the social media monitoring. He listened carefully and took notes, then said we needed to work on boundary scripts. He explained that boundaries are sentences I could use to tell Mom how her actions affect me without blaming or attacking her. He taught me to use I statements like, I feel scared when you take my phone because I can't talk to my friends, instead of, you're controlling me. We spent the whole session practicing different scripts and role-playing me saying them to Mom. Dean would pretend to be Mom and respond the way she actually would, then help me figure out what to say next. The words felt impossible even in the safety of his office. I couldn't imagine actually saying them at home without everything exploding into an even bigger fight. Dean said it was okay to start small. maybe just one boundary at a time instead of trying to change everything at once. He also said to remember that setting boundaries isn't mean or disrespectful, it's just being honest about what I need. But I knew Mom would see any boundary as an attack on her, and proof that I didn't love her anymore. That night after dinner, I went up to my room and pulled out my journal. I started writing a letter to Mom even though I knew I'd probably never give it to her. I wrote about how scared I was of my own face, and how I didn't even know what I really looked like anymore. I explained that the makeup rules had been going on for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just be myself. I told her I knew she thought she was protecting me, but she was actually hurting me instead. I wrote about the skin problems and the panic attacks and how isolated I felt from everyone my age. I explained that I needed her to see what she was doing to me and help me figure out who I was under all the makeup. The letter was 3 pages long by the time I finished, and my hand was cramping. I folded it up and hid it in the back of my desk drawer behind some old school papers. I was too scared to actually give it to her because I knew she'd just get angry and defensive. But writing it all down helped me understand my own feelings better. It helped me see that I wasn't crazy for wanting things to be different, and that my feelings were valid even if Mom didn't agree with them. The following Tuesday, Whitney called me down to her office during lunch and said she'd scheduled a meeting with the school administration. She explained that my anxiety was now affecting my grades and attendance enough that we needed to discuss 504 accommodations. A 504 plan is basically a document that says the school has to make certain changes to help students with disabilities or health problems. Whitney had put together a whole folder of documentation, including notes from all our sessions, the medical note from the nurse about my skin damage, and records of my panic attacks at the school. The meeting was scheduled for Friday morning, and both my parents had been invited to attend. Whitney said the principal and vice principal would be there along with her and my guidance counselor. She showed me the documentation she'd prepared, and it was strange seeing my suffering written down in such official language. There were graphs showing my grade decline and attendance problems. There were photos of my skin irritation from the nurse's office. There were detailed notes about my panic attacks and the times I'd hidden in the bathroom crying. Seeing it all laid out like that made it feel more real and serious than it had before. Whitney said the goal was to get the school to recognize that what was happening at home was affecting my education and to put supports in place to help me. Friday morning arrived, and I was so nervous I could barely eat breakfast. Mom did my makeup extra heavy that day, maybe trying to prove a point or show the school that I looked fine. Dad drove us all to the school in silence, and we walked into the conference room where Whitney, the principal, the vice principal, and my guidance counselor were already waiting. Everyone sat down around the big table, and Whitney started presenting the documentation. She went through everything systematically, showing my grade decline and attendance issues and the medical notes about my skin. Then she carefully mentioned grooming autonomy and age-appropriate self-care, explaining that the current situation at home was creating significant anxiety and physical health problems. Mom's face got redder and redder as Whitney talked. Suddenly, Mom stood up and started yelling about how this was a personal family matter, and the school had no right to interfere. She said she was protecting me and teaching me important life skills. She accused Whitney of turning me against her and trying to destroy our family. The principal tried to calm her down, but Mom just got louder, saying that makeup was survival and beauty standards were real whether people wanted to admit it or not. I sat there frozen in my chair, mortified that everyone was seeing her like this. Dad sat quietly through most of it, but when the principal directly asked him if he agreed with the current grooming requirements, he hesitated, then quietly said he thought I should be allowed to make some choices about my own appearance. Mom whipped around to stare at him like he'd betrayed her. The meeting ended with the school agreeing to put together a 504 plan and schedule a follow-up meeting in 2 weeks. Mom stormed out without saying goodbye to anyone, and I had to ride home in the car with her furious silence filling every inch of space. The next Monday, I had an appointment with the dermatologist that the school nurse had set up weeks ago. Dad took me since Mom was still barely speaking to either of us after the school meeting. The dermatologist's name was Cecilia, and she had me sit in the exam chair under bright lights while she looked at my face with a magnifying glass. She asked detailed questions about what products I used and how often and for how long. I told her about the daily routine since I was 5 and watched her eyebrows go up. She took photos of my skin and showed me on her computer screen where the damage was worst. She pointed out areas of thinning skin and hyperpigmentation, and explained that certain ingredients in the products Mom used were causing allergic reactions. She said my skin was trying to heal itself but couldn't, because I kept applying the same irritants every single day. Then she wrote a detailed medical note on her official letterhead, explaining that continuing the current makeup practices would cause permanent scarring and skin damage. The note used words like contraindicated and medical necessity and dermatological health. She handed it to me in a sealed envelope and said to give it to my parents. She also prescribed a gentle cleanser and moisturizer, and said I needed to let my skin heal for at least a few weeks with no makeup at all. I held the envelope in my hands in the car ride home, and it felt like I was carrying proof that I wasn't making this up or being dramatic. This was real medical evidence that Mom's rules were causing actual physical harm. That night at dinner, I waited until everyone had their food before pulling the envelope out of my backpack. My hands were shaking as I slid it across the table to Mom. She looked at it suspiciously before opening it and reading the note inside. I watched her face as she read, hoping to see some recognition or concern or willingness to change. Instead, she barely glanced at it before putting it down and saying it was just an excuse made up by a doctor who didn't understand that beauty requires sacrifice. She said dermatologists always try to scare people into buying expensive products, and this was probably just a sales tactic. Dad picked up the note and read it carefully, his face getting more serious as he went. He said it seemed pretty clear and official, and maybe we should listen to what the doctor recommended. Mom snapped at him that he didn't understand anything about what women go through in this world. She said a little skin irritation was worth it if it meant I wouldn't be ugly and alone. The dismissal of actual medical evidence showed me how deep her denial went. She wasn't going to change her mind no matter what proof I showed her. She'd built her entire identity around these beliefs, and admitting she was wrong would mean admitting she'd hurt me for years for no reason. I excused myself from the table and went upstairs feeling more hopeless than ever. A few days later, I came home from the school to find Dad sitting on my bed with my journal in his hands. My heart stopped when I saw it because I'd hidden it so carefully in my desk drawer. He explained that he'd been looking for extra blankets in my room and found the letter I'd written to Mom. His eyes were red and puffy like he'd been crying for a long time. He said he had no idea how bad things really were. He'd thought I was okay with the makeup, that maybe I even liked it since I'd been doing it for so long. He said reading my words about being scared of my own face and not knowing who I was had broken something inside him. He kept apologizing over and over, saying he should have protected me and he'd failed as a father by looking the other way. I sat down next to him on the bed, and for the first time ever, he seemed to actually see what was happening. Not just noticing it and ignoring it like usual, but really seeing the damage and understanding his role in it. He promised things were going to change, and that he wasn't going to let Mom control my life like this anymore. I wanted to believe him, but I'd been disappointed so many times before that I couldn't let myself hope too much. Still, having him finally acknowledge the truth felt like something important had shifted, even if I didn't know yet what that shift would mean for my future. I woke up the next morning to the smell of bacon, which was weird because Mom always made breakfast while doing my makeup. I came downstairs and found Dad at the stove flipping pancakes with his work shirt already on. He looked at me and said we were eating together as a family this morning, no rushing. Mom stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and her makeup bag in one hand, checking her watch every few seconds. Dad took his time plating the food and pouring orange juice, asking me about my homework and weekend plans like we had all the time in the world. We sat at the table for 20 full minutes while Mom tapped her foot and kept glancing at the clock on the microwave. When I finally went upstairs to get ready, I had 20 minutes less for the makeup routine, and Mom had to do a faster version than usual. It felt like the smallest possible victory, but it was something, and I could tell Mom was annoyed that Dad had interfered with her system. The next morning, I woke up to Mom shaking my shoulder in the dark, and when I checked my phone, it was 5 in the morning. She'd set her alarm earlier to make up for the time Dad had stolen yesterday, and now I had to sit at the vanity while the sky was still black outside. The extra early wake-up left me feeling like I'd been hit by a truck, and at the school I could barely keep my eyes open during first period. My math teacher had to call on me twice before I realized she was talking to me, and I gave a completely wrong answer that made some kids laugh. By lunch, I was so tired I put my head down on the table and Rowan had to shake me awake when the bell rang. My grades started slipping because I couldn't focus on homework when I got home, and I kept falling asleep during tests. Mom didn't care about the exhaustion. She just cared that I looked perfect every single day no matter what it cost. During my next session with Dean, I told him about Mom's escalating control and Dad's small attempts to help, and he said we needed to make a safety plan for when things got really bad. We spent the whole hour writing down specific steps I could take if Mom got violent, or if I needed to leave the house quickly. The plan included 3 different routes to Rowan's house depending on which door I could get out of, a list of people to call in order starting with Dad, then Rowan's mom, then Whitney, and scripts for de-escalating Mom's anger without making things worse. Dean made me practice the de-escalation phrases out loud until they felt natural, things like agreeing with her emotions while setting boundaries and using calm voice tones even when I was scared. Having the plan written down in my backpack made me feel slightly less powerless, like I had some control over what might happen, even though I really hoped I'd never need to use any of it. The plan felt both comforting and terrifying because making it meant admitting that things could get dangerous enough to need an escape route. A few days later, Rowan texted me asking if I wanted to come over after school, and when I got to her house, she was sitting on her front porch with her homework spread out. She said her porch could be my no-makeup hour zone, a place where I could just exist without anyone judging my face or making me feel ugly. I accepted nervously because being barefaced in public still made my stomach twist with fear, but I trusted Rowan more than almost anyone. The first time I sat there with my bare face while she did her algebra homework next to me, I kept waiting for something bad to happen. But nothing did. People walked by on the sidewalk and didn't stare or point or look disgusted, and after a while I started to feel almost normal. We sat there for an hour just being teenagers doing homework, and it was the most peaceful I'd felt in months. I started going to Rowan's porch 3 times a week, always making sure to get home before my curfew so Mom wouldn't get suspicious. One evening I was sitting on the porch steps with my bare face catching the last bit of sunlight when I heard a car engine get loud and close. I looked up and saw Mom's car pulling over to the curb right in front of Rowan's house, and my whole body went cold with panic. Mom got out of the car and slammed the door so hard the sound echoed down the street, and she started screaming at me about disrespect and humiliation before she even reached the porch. She yelled that I was making her look like a bad mother, that the neighbors could see me looking ugly and unwashed, that I was throwing her love and protection back in her face. Rowan's mom came outside to see what the noise was about, and other neighbors started appearing in their windows and doorways to watch. Mom didn't care who was watching. She just kept screaming about how I was trying to ruin her reputation and make her look like she didn't care about me. Rowan's mom tried to calm her down, but Mom told her to mind her own business and stop encouraging me to be ugly. I sat frozen on the steps with tears running down my bare face while Mom's voice got louder and higher, until finally she grabbed my arm and dragged me to the car. The drive home was silent except for her angry breathing, and I knew this was going to make everything so much worse. The next morning at breakfast, Mom announced that she was considering pulling me out of public school for homeschooling, because clearly the school was teaching me to disrespect her. She said if I couldn't be trusted to follow her rules when I was out of her sight, then I wouldn't be out of her sight anymore. Then she took my bus pass out of my wallet and put it in her purse, saying from now on she'd be driving me everywhere so she could make sure I stayed presentable. The isolation plan was so clear and terrifying. I could see exactly what she was doing by cutting off my transportation and threatening to remove me from the school. She was willing to destroy my entire social life and education just to keep control over my face, and I realized there was no limit to how far she'd go. I felt trapped in a way I'd never felt before. Like the walls were closing in, and soon I wouldn't have any connection to the outside world at all. That afternoon, I had a session with Whitney and told her everything that happened at Rowan's house and the homeschool threat. She got very quiet and serious, then said she needed to consult with her supervisor about next steps. I sat in her office for 30 minutes while she was gone, my stomach churning with fear that they were going to call CPS and make everything explode. When she came back, she explained that they'd decided to try a family support track first, with very close monitoring before making a mandated report to child services. She said they wanted to give my family a chance to work with the school and therapists before involving the state, but that if things got worse or if I was in danger, they wouldn't hesitate to make that call. I felt relieved that we weren't involving CPS yet, because I knew that would make Mom completely lose it, but I was also scared that this was my last chance before things got even worse, and the decision would be taken out of my hands. Whitney made me promise to text her every day to check in, and to call immediately if I felt unsafe, and I agreed, even though I wasn't sure what counted as unsafe anymore. 2 nights later, I woke up to shouting from downstairs, loud enough that I could hear every word even through my closed door. Mom and Dad were having a massive fight about her treatment of me, with Dad saying she was going too far and Mom screaming that he didn't understand anything about protecting a daughter. The fight went on for over an hour with things getting thrown and doors slamming, and I lay in bed with my pillow over my head trying to block it out. Finally, the house went quiet, and when I looked out my window, I saw Dad sitting in his car in the driveway with the overhead light on. He stayed there all night, and in the morning when he came back inside, his eyes were red and his clothes were wrinkled. He walked straight into the kitchen where Mom and I were sitting and announced that we were all going to family therapy, or he was moving out. The ultimatum came out of nowhere and shocked both Mom and me into complete silence. Mom started to argue, but Dad held up his hand and said this wasn't a discussion. It was a boundary, and he was done watching her hurt me without doing anything about it. He'd already called Dean and set up an appointment for all 3 of us next week, and if Mom refused to go, then he'd pack his bags that same day. I'd never seen Dad stand up to Mom like that, never heard him use that firm tone or draw such a clear line, and I didn't know whether to feel hopeful or more scared about what would happen next. The week before our first family therapy session felt like living in a house made of glass, everyone moving carefully to avoid shattering the fragile piece. Mom barely spoke to Dad and kept looking at him like he'd betrayed her, but she didn't argue about the therapy appointment. When the day finally came, we all drove to Dean's office in tense silence and sat in the waiting room without looking at each other. Dean called us in and we arranged ourselves on his couch, me in the middle with my parents on either side like bookends. The session started with Dean asking us each to share our perspective on what was happening in our family, and Mom immediately launched into a speech about how everything she did was protection and love. She cried while describing her own childhood and her mother's constant criticism, explaining that she'd promised herself she'd never let her daughter suffer the same humiliation and rejection she'd experienced. She talked about how cruel the world is to women who don't meet beauty standards, how she'd seen pretty girls get opportunities that ugly girls never got, and how she was just trying to give me every advantage possible. She said she knew I didn't understand now, but one day I'd thank her for teaching me how to survive, and her voice broke on the word survive, like it was the most important thing in the world. I sat there listening to her cry, and for the first time I could see that she genuinely believed she was saving me, that in her mind she was the hero of this story protecting her daughter from a painful fate. It didn't make what she was doing okay, but it helped me understand that she wasn't just being cruel for no reason. She was acting out her own trauma on me because she didn't know any other way. Dean let her talk for a long time without interrupting, and then he turned to me and asked how I was feeling about everything Mom had shared. I opened my mouth to say something careful and diplomatic, but what came out instead was the truth I'd been holding back for years. I said I was scared of my own face and I didn't even know what I really looked like anymore. The words hung in the air between us, raw and honest and impossible to take back. The room went completely quiet, and even Mom stopped talking, her mouth half open with whatever she'd been about to say frozen on her lips. Dean leaned forward slightly and the weight of my admission seemed to press down on all of us, making the air feel thick and hard to breathe. Dean lets the silence sit for a minute before he leans back in his chair and starts talking about what he calls baby steps. He says we need to find one tiny thing Mom can agree to that proves the world won't end if I'm not wearing makeup. Something so small she can't say no, but big enough that it matters. Mom's already shaking her head before he finishes, but Dean holds up his hand and asks her to just listen. He suggests 1 supervised hour at home per week where I don't have to wear makeup, with Mom right there in the room so she can see nothing bad happens. Mom's face goes pale and she starts listing all the reasons why that's dangerous. But Dean keeps his voice calm and asks what specifically she thinks will happen during 1 hour at home with her present. She can't really answer that, and Dad jumps in saying he thinks it's reasonable, that it's just 1 hour and he'll be there too. The negotiation goes back and forth for 20 minutes with Mom trying to add conditions like keeping the curtains closed, and me staying in my room, but Dean gently pushes back on each one until finally Mom agrees to 1 hour in the living room on Sunday afternoons. It's the smallest possible thing, but it's the first time in 12 years she's agreed to any flexibility at all, and I feel something shift in my chest that might be hope. That first Sunday I wake up feeling sick with nervousness about the makeup-free hour. Mom's been tense all week, and this morning she did my makeup even heavier than usual, like she's trying to make up for the hour I'll be without it. When the agreed time comes, Mom goes through the house covering every mirror with towels before she'll let me wash my face. I stand at the bathroom sink scrubbing off the foundation and mascara while my heart pounds, and when I look up there's just a towel where my reflection should be. I walk into the living room with my bare face and sit on the couch while Mom settles into the armchair across from me, and Dad positions himself between us like a referee. The hour feels endless with Mom staring at me the whole time, her hands gripping the armrests so hard her knuckles turn white. She keeps opening her mouth like she wants to say something, then closing it again, and I can see her fighting the urge to grab her makeup bag. But she keeps her word and doesn't make me put anything on, and even though I feel exposed and wrong without the makeup, there's also this tiny seed of freedom growing in my chest. When the hour ends, Mom practically runs to get her makeup bag and insists on redoing my full face immediately, but the fact that we made it through it all feels huge. 3 days later, I'm lying in bed around 11 at night when Dad knocks softly on my door. He asks if I want to go to the grocery store with him because we're out of milk, and something about the way he says it makes me realize this is an offer, not just a random errand. Mom's already asleep and he's giving me a chance to go out barefaced in public where real strangers will see me. My heart starts racing and I almost say no because the thought terrifies me, but I force myself to get up and follow him downstairs. We get in the car and drive to the 24-hour store in complete silence, and I keep my hands pressed against my bare cheeks like I'm trying to hold my face together. Inside the store, the fluorescent lights feel too bright, and I'm sure everyone's staring at me. But when I finally look around, nobody's paying attention at all. We walk through the aisles and Dad takes his time, letting me see that the cashier rings us up without gasping in horror, that the other late-night shoppers just go about their business. The normalcy of it hits me so hard I feel tears starting and I have to pretend I'm looking at cereal boxes until I get control of myself. On the drive home, Dad reaches over and squeezes my shoulder once, and that simple gesture of solidarity almost breaks me. The next afternoon, I'm in my room doing homework when I hear Mom's phone dinging repeatedly with notifications. I go downstairs and find her on the couch scrolling through her social media, and I can see she's posted more old photos of me in full makeup from when I was 7 or 8. Most of the comments are the usual compliments, but this time there are a few that say things like, "Why does a child need so much makeup?" and "This seems like a lot for someone so young." Mom reads them over and over, her finger hovering over the delete button but not pressing it. She looks up at me standing in the doorway and her face is confused, like she's seeing something she didn't expect. For years, everyone validated her choices, and now random strangers are questioning her, and I can see her certainty starting to wobble. She doesn't say anything about the comments, but she also doesn't delete them right away, and that hesitation feels significant. At the school the next day, Rowan asks if I want to hang out at her house after classes. We end up on her front porch doing homework, and she suddenly starts talking about her own mom, and how she makes comments about Rowan's weight at every meal. She describes how her mom calls it caring, but it makes Rowan afraid to eat in front of anyone, how she started skipping lunch and hiding food in her room. I listen to her story and realize that pain comes in different forms, but the need for acceptance is universal, that I'm not the only one dealing with a parent's issues getting projected onto me. We sit there comparing notes about our mom's criticisms, and for the first time our friendship feels like it's about real understanding, not just her helping me with my specific problem. She gets what it's like to feel like you're not enough for your parent, and knowing I'm not alone in that makes the weight feel slightly lighter. Our next family therapy session with Dean focuses on establishing clearer boundaries now that we've proven the makeup-free hour can work. Dean writes everything down on a whiteboard so we can all see it, and he helps us agree to specific rules instead of vague promises. No surprise visits to the school gets written down first, then a maximum 30-minute morning routine that Mom has to stick to, and my right to choose my makeup level for casual outings like errands or hanging out with friends. Mom agrees to each one reluctantly, her voice tight and her arms crossed, but she agrees. Dad promises to enforce the boundaries if she breaks them, and Dean makes him repeat that promise while looking at Mom so she knows he's serious. The boundaries feel fragile, like they could shatter if anyone pushes too hard, but having them written down and witnessed makes them more real than anything we've tried before. 2 weeks later, Mom gets a migraine on Saturday morning and stays in bed all day. I bring her water and medicine and notice she's lying there without any makeup on, just her bare face against the pillow. She tolerates it because she's too sick to care, and I realize this might be the first time I've seen her face completely bare since I was really young. She doesn't mention it when she feels better on Sunday, doesn't rush to put makeup on the second the pain fades, and something about seeing her survive a whole day without it seems to shift something small in her rigid belief system. She's proved to herself that she can exist without the mask, even if it was only because she had no choice. Senior photo day arrives after weeks of me negotiating with Mom about how much makeup I'll wear. She wanted to do my full face like always, but I pushed back using the boundaries we set in therapy, and we finally agreed she could supervise while I do my own makeup. I sit at her vanity with her standing behind me, and I choose a natural look. Just light foundation and mascara and a bit of lip color. Mom's hands keep twitching like she wants to grab the brushes and add more, but she forces herself to just watch and occasionally suggest a technique. When I see the photos later that day on the photographer's camera, I actually recognize the person looking back. It's not the doll face version Mom always created, and it's not completely bare either. It's somewhere in the middle, and it feels like me. I show Mom the photos and she stares at them for a long time without saying anything, and I can't tell if she's disappointed or starting to see that I can look acceptable without the heavy makeup she's always insisted on. That night I hear Dad moving around upstairs, and when I investigate, I find him carrying an armful of clothes to the guest room. He sees me watching and explains quietly that he's staying there until Mom can respect the boundaries we set in therapy, that he's done watching her push against every agreement we make. Mom appears in the hallway and starts arguing, but Dad just keeps moving his things, his face set in a way I've never seen before. He brings his toiletries and his phone charger and even his pillow, making it clear this isn't a one-night thing. His willingness to follow through on consequences instead of just threatening them makes me feel protected for the first time in years. Like maybe I don't have to fight this battle completely alone. A few days later, Whitney calls Mom and tells her about a local women's support group for mothers dealing with their own childhood trauma. I expect Mom to refuse immediately, but instead she asks for the details, and that Thursday night she actually goes to a meeting. She's gone for 2 hours, and when she comes home, she walks past me and Dad without making eye contact and goes straight to her room. The next morning, she's quiet at breakfast, not defensive or angry, but thoughtful in a way that's completely new. She doesn't talk about what happened at the meeting, but something's different in how she holds herself. Like maybe she heard things from other mothers that made her question her own story. I dare to hope that she might be starting to examine her own pain, instead of just passing it on to me, that this could be the beginning of something changing for real. 2 weeks later, I walk into a bookstore 3 blocks from our house and ask if they're hiring. The manager looks at my application and my completely bare face and says, I can start next Monday. The dress code is jeans and the store t-shirt, and nobody says anything about makeup. My first shift, I watch the other employees come in wearing whatever they want on their faces, and it hits me that Mom's rules aren't some universal law. The girl working the register has acne scars visible, and she's laughing with customers like it doesn't matter. The guy shelving books in the back has dark circles under his eyes, and nobody treats him differently. I spend 8 hours surrounded by people who don't think faces need fixing, and something loosens in my chest. The following Saturday morning, I'm getting ready for my shift when Mom appears in my doorway with her makeup bag. She says we haven't done a proper face together in weeks and she misses our routine. I take a breath and use the script Dean taught me. I tell her I appreciate that she cares, but I'm going to work with just moisturizer today because that's what feels right for me. Her face goes tight and she starts saying I'm being disrespectful and throwing away everything she taught me. I stay calm and repeat that this is my choice and I need her to respect it. She gets louder and Dad appears from downstairs. He picks up my work bag and tells me to come on. He'll drive me. Mom follows us to the car still arguing, but Dad starts the engine and we pull away. In the car, he says he's proud of me for holding my ground, and I realize this is what protection actually looks like. At my next therapy session, Dean says we've made so much progress that he wants to move to twice a month instead of weekly. He reminds me that the tools we've built are mine to keep and use whenever I need them. I've been journaling every night and doing the breathing exercises when I feel panic rising, and those habits feel solid now. Dean says I'm capable of maintaining my progress with less frequent check-ins, and hearing him say that makes me feel stronger than I have in years. We schedule our next appointment for 2 weeks out, and I leave his office feeling like I'm carrying something valuable that nobody can take away. Graduation day arrives on a Thursday morning in June. I do my makeup at my own vanity, just some light coverage and mascara, and when I look in the mirror, I see myself. Mom and Dad pick me up and we drive to the school together. Mom sits through the entire ceremony without making comments about how I should have used more blush or how my lips look washed out. The piece between us feels thin like paper, but it's there. When they call my name, I walk across the stage wearing exactly what I chose to put on my face that morning, and I accept my diploma, knowing I survived something that could have destroyed me. Mom claps from the audience and I can see her hands shaking, but she's trying. A week later, Mom knocks on my bedroom door and asks if we can talk. She sits on my bed and her hands twist in her lap. She says she knows she hurt me and she's sorry for that, but she was trying to protect me from the pain she went through. She says her own mother told her every day that she was ugly and worthless, and she thought if she taught me young enough, I could avoid that suffering. I don't tell her I forgive her because I'm not there yet and I won't lie about it. But I tell her I see that she was hurting too, and I'm willing to keep working on this in therapy. She nods and wipes her eyes and we sit there in silence for a minute before she goes back downstairs. It's not a perfect apology, but it's something. 2 weeks after graduation, I sign a lease for a small apartment near the bookstore. Dad co-signs the paperwork and helps me fill out the rental application. The day I get the keys, Mom shows up with a cardboard box full of kitchen supplies. She brings in plates and cups and silverware and sets them on the counter. She stays for 20 minutes and doesn't say anything about my bare face, even though I can see her looking at it. When she leaves, she hugs me at the door and tells me to call if I need anything. The visit is short and respectful, and it proves that the boundaries we built can actually hold. I set up a system where I text Mom my availability for visits instead of her just showing up whenever she wants. I keep going to therapy once a month to check in with Dean and make sure I'm maintaining the progress we made. Rowan comes over for movie nights and we talk about real things, not just makeup and appearances. The people at work become friends who know my story and support me without judgment. Having structure and boundaries makes me feel safe in a way I never did before. I can stay connected to my family without losing myself in the process. 3 months into living on my own, I'm getting ready for work one morning, and I catch my reflection in the bathroom mirror. My face is completely bare and I'm not scared. The shift feels huge, like something fundamental has changed inside me. I'm not afraid of being seen anymore. That same week, Mom texts me that she's enrolled in ongoing counseling to work on her childhood stuff. Dad calls every Sunday to check in and ask how I'm doing, and he actually listens to my answers. Nothing is perfect or fixed completely. Mom still struggles with seeing me without makeup sometimes, and I still have days where the old fear creeps back. But we're all slightly better than we were before, and for right now, that feels like enough. That's my take. But I already know you've got opinions. What would you have done differently? Drop it in the comments because I'll be scrolling through them later. You always bring something new to the table.